There's a classic case study by Sheriff 1935. That's all very scary, and that causes a fight or flight reaction in our bodies. What is activism? Hello everyone, my name is Jessica and welcome back to my channel where I read the science so you don't have to. I've been doing the coronavirus series and I had some videos to be released, but at the present time I thought that it would be correct of me or the best use of my time and my platform to speak on current issues in a way that nobody has I've seen addressed before. And today I'm going to be talking about the psychology behind activism and the psychology behind movements. And now this movement is something that is always going on in the background. These times when it comes to the forefront of social media is just part of the work, of the fantastic work that they do. But we always see the type of same responses in these times of public outrage, and I just wanted to look at the psychology behind how do we receive new information that might be difficult for us, and how do we change outrage into activism, and what are some barriers that there may be between emotion to action. This video is not going to tell you how to feel, what to do, but I'm talking from what I've learned from my psychology intercalated degree. So firstly, I'll start with a very basic principle in psychology and cognitive science, and that is schemas. Schemas are the way that we hang new information about the world. So every time we go into a situation, we don't need to learn absolutely everything. For example, if I go into a fast food restaurant, I know to go straight to the till and do my order and I'm going to get my meal that way. Whereas I don't go into McDonald's and then sit down and wait for a waiter to come, because okay, I know the general layout of a fast food restaurant, so I know generally how I should behave and I know what to expect. And schemas are built by past experiences or what we've been told. Heuristics, which is the approach to how we problem solve and make decisions. They're mental shortcuts. So with our brains, unfortunately or fortunately, we always go via the path of least resistance or the easiest path, so that we can do the least amount of cognition. Heuristics are the way that we problem solve and make decisions. So they are rules of thumb, so that we don't have to always look at a decision and start from the very basics. We can kind of like, okay, I know what I need to do here, kind of. And normally it means that we can do things more efficiently, but sometimes it does make things more suboptimal. Bias. So bias is the action of supporting or opposing a particular person or thing in an unfair way because of allowing personal opinions to influence your judgment. All come into conversations or discussions or experiences with a certain bias. And as I said, I believe that way that we can progress is always knowing that we are not completely objective, so that we can become more objective. What is activism? So activism, the definition is the policy or action of using vigorous campaigning to bring about political or social change. What is the first thing that comes to mind when you think about activism? Is it people throwing red paint onto meat restaurants? Is it rioting and looting? Is it lawyers in an office changing legislation? What do you think about activism? And that will shape your attitudes towards activists, and also how the news portrays activists to us as well. The first barrier, or the first thing we have to think about, is in the definition of the word activism, and that is the change part. So change is always going to be a massive hurdle due to a phenomenon called status quo bias. This is the bias of being more invested and comfortable in the current state of affairs, even if better alternatives exist. So this is explored by Ritov and Barron 1990 vaccine experiment, where you can tell somebody about a disease and you can let all these terrible consequences, then you can tell somebody about a vaccine and maybe there's a few side effects. People tended to go with not doing the vaccine because you'd rather just go with what is already happening rather than introduce something new. And this is explained by Anderson 2003, who explains it through a rational emotional model that decision making is based on avoiding experiencing regret and fear regulation. Okay, so we would rather just stay with how things are because we don't want to regret shifting the boat or causing trouble, kind of thing. And fear regulation. So fear, we all know with fear you have adrenaline, and that's a fight or flight response. Fear is the number one emotion that brings us back to our primal instincts. So when we are presented with scary information, which all of this is the information that the people put into our worlds to protect us, may have evil intentions, or that the government, who we believe should give justice to all, don't and are selective. It's extremely scary. Or, you know, that somebody can be in their home and the police knock on their door and just kill them, and then there's no repercussions. That's all very scary, and that causes a fight or flight reaction in our bodies. Fight against it, i.e., you can become an activist, or we share the story, or we donate to the cause, or we try to change policy. Or we can fight, but again, going down the least route of resistance, where we fight the person telling us about the information. Or flight, where we run away from the information, or we run away from the conversation and those ideas. And it could look like, oh, I don't really know much about that, so I'm not going to talk about it, or swipe away from the post, or distract ourselves with something new, you know, distract with something new, or distract with more positive narrative. And also talk about the fear of ostracization, because I feel like with this, let's say this week, where we've seen a lot of publicity for the Black Lives Matter movement, we're seeing that people are wanting to share, putting pressure on people to share the news, and rightly so as well. And the reason why some people might not want to is because of fear of ostracization, and not even just share, but make positive influence in their workplaces, being an ally or being an advocate in their actual spaces, so offline. And that's due to fear of ostracization, and this is in social psychology. Now, social psychology is the scientific study of how people's thoughts, feelings and behaviors are influenced by the actual, imagined or implied presence of others. As individualistic as we might want to feel or think that we are, we do things according to those around us. Friendship group, religious group, workplace, family, etc. There's a classic case study by Sheriff 1930 where he did this light effect, where he showed a flashing dots, and when you show flashing dots repeatedly in a dark room, it seems like the dot has shifted or moved, even though it hasn't. And he asked people, oh, how much do you think that the light has shifted or moved? And they said their answers, and they were very much different to everybody else's answers. Then they put the group together, and then they asked the same question again. They saw that all of their answers changed to conform to what other people thought. And then now when they go back to being them by themselves and ask the same question, their answers never deviate from that new norm. So we can see that even the way that we perceive things, or the way that we tell things or report things is influenced by popular culture. And that is why it's so important for celebrities to be shining lights on important issues, because human rights should be popular culture. But unfortunately, we are shown again and again that that is not quite the case. Information and the persuasion process. So what happens when we receive new information? It's based on three different things: the communicator, the communication, so the message, and the situation. Okay, so the communicator, firstly, the things that we have is their credibility, likability, and reference group. So how credible is the source? How likable is the source? Reference group, are they the same as us. So do they go to the same uni as us? Are they the same colour as us? Are they the same gender as us? You know, unfortunately, we are more receptive to information when people are from the same group as us. And this is why it's extremely important for example, men to be feminists and white people to be pro-black, because your voice carries different in those spaces. Communication, so the actual message, so discrepancy from what we already believe. So if you're telling me that the police kill and that there's no repercussions for them, but I've been told my whole life that I believe that the police are great people, that's a big jump or a lot of cognitive work to do. Or if I've grown up in a neighbourhood where it's over-policed and you know, I've been a victim, or I know people who have been victim of police brutality, etc., then I'll be able to know that, yeah, the police are not always who they say they are. Motive arousal, so how the emotions that the message arouses. So with these videos of people being executed on the streets, it's extremely emotive, and that helps in the short term, but then in the long term you need more to keep those emotions at the forefront. And argument strength, so this is what lasts the test of time: evidence, facts, etc. But unfortunately we have a confirmational bias where we are more receptive to facts that already confirm our existing beliefs. And situation, so did we have a forewarning of this news that we were going to receive, or is it a distraction, or are we distracted? And I think that this is why be more at the forefront during these corona times, because we're less distracted, we're much less distracted, we're all at home glued to social media. So I feel like this is why this message has particularly resonated. Well, from what I can see, I've seen more non-black people be really invested. 3 things: goes to the person and it inoculates the person and they think about it. The emotion gets transferred to them. Then they have mechanisms which try to stay consistent, because your brain doesn't, you have to survive in this world. So your brain is not just going to accept new information that just completely rattles everything it's built or been told for 20 plus years, etc. You know, so you have consistency mechanisms, you have counter arguing in your head, and or message learning. And then what you can end up as, the response can be an attitude change, okay, or source derogation. See the people who are getting annoyed, so for example people unfollowing influencers, for example, who are speaking up on it, like, oh, I'm disappointed in you. Done. Message distortion, people change the message to kind of fit their own narrative, or blanket rejection, people just reject the whole message completely. Say something about also from where we are and where we sit in this situation, i.e. are we, and this is intersectionality, which I can't get into at the moment because it's too long, but if you want me to make a video on that, then I can. But then that will determine what endpoint do we see for activism. And if we take Simon 1978, the satisficing theory, when satisficing, people choose the first option that meets their minimum requirements. So in these times, what meets your requirement? Rehaul of institutions which were built on systemic racism, and you want them to be completely overhauled, where black bodies are treated as equal on the micro and macro level in all institutions. But you know, that sounds like utopia. You know, it sounds so obvious, but it's also sounding like a utopia. What is the end point for you? How do we get to those end points? What do you think of the action needed to get to that? Do you think it's impossible? Why do you think it's impossible? Do you think it is not neat and tidy, or too messy, and we should know. You know, say in finishing this video, do not be struck by perfection paralysis. Sometimes we want to speak out, or we want to do something, but we think, oh, we might not exactly be perfect, so I'm not going to do anything at all. And that is most definitely worse than at least trying to do something, as long as you are completely receptive to criticism, to constructive criticism, and always learning and growing. Always be open to learning in everything, but especially when fighting for the oppressed. And always be compassionate, always be more compassionate of the oppressed. These systems have been given to us. It does not mean that they have to be our status quo. And yeah, I think we all go through a range of emotions when these things happen, when these things come to the forefront, and this was just my piece. Thought I wanted to go through it in a different type of way. If anything you didn't understand, please just rewind back, rewatch it. I'll be writing the links down below as always, and comment down below what you think. Share if you found this helpful. And as always, Black Lives Matter. Peace and love and strength to everybody watching this.